Hello everyone, welcome back to A Wild Approach. My name is Macy Lou, and in today's video we are going to celebrate the last several years in my garden, and I'm going to share my favorite photos and or videos depending on what I can gather, and I'm going to share them in this video with you. This is going to be kind of instead of a year in review, this is going to be more like the past few years in review. I really love putting videos like this together. I really find them inspiring. I love to watch other people's videos that are similar, where they show the growth of their garden over several years' time and just how different their garden looked when they first started versus how it looks now, and just how lush things grow in, and just how wonderful it is. It is so inspiring, and so I hope you all enjoy this video too. I started gardening several years ago, and I really started getting even more into native plant gardening around the 2019 or 2020 mark. And before that I was doing more just like general butterfly gardening. And if you don't know, that's how I started. I started by wanting to attract butterflies, and then I just got obsessed from there. And now I love so many different kinds of wildlife critters. It's hilarious. It's great. And it's wonderful. And so I hope you enjoyed this video with me, and let me know what you think in the comment section below. And while I'm at it, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Hit that like button, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that I know which videos resonate the most with you guys, and so that I can, moving forward, figure out what videos you want to see more of. So let's get right into this video. When I started gardening, it was all to attract butterflies, and I didn't jump right into native plants. That came later. I started with more traditional gardening. I went to the big box stores. I picked up whatever was blooming at the time. A lot of times I ignored the plant tags and didn't even plant things in the right place. I didn't really care much about lawns being this huge sterile carpet of green that, so many people have. I didn't really think of that much at the time. I was just kind of like, I want a little pretty garden bed that attracts butterflies. I just want some flowers here and there that attract the butterflies. That was all I cared about. And attached to that, I kind of wanted to grow some like vegetables and some fruits. So I kind of got into growing like tomatoes and squash, and I grew some spinach and stuff like that. And I found that I wasn't the best vegetable gardener in the world. Like, I was really bad at growing cucumbers, the worst at growing cucumbers. Tomatoes, kind of hit and miss. My big tomatoes, I wasn't very good at growing those. But cherry tomatoes popped up on their own, grew on their own. I didn't really have to do anything. And they were actually just a happy accident. Cherry tomatoes just came up because I put compost that wasn't fully finished on my garden, and my cherry tomato seeds sprouted from the rotting cherry tomatoes that I had thrown on my compost pile. So some of the things that grow the best are things you're not even necessarily trying to grow, right? But those cherry tomatoes were good, and they actually would reseed themselves a little bit, but they didn't really go too crazy. I was able to keep them under control, but for a while they would kind of reseed themselves for a couple years. I even gave some away to family, and the plants themselves, the extra ones, and it was fun. But I started to go down the wildlife rabbit hole, and the way that this happened is I was really obsessively researching how to attract butterflies to my garden. My number one favorite butterfly at the time was the eastern tiger swallowtail. And so I was obsessively reading about that. And then I, from there, found out about the other butterflies and what they had to eat. And because of this, I quickly discovered that the thread throughout my research that I could not ignore any longer was that the plants that provided the most food for the butterflies, those plants, the thread that was throughout the whole thing, those plants were native plants, okay? I couldn't ignore this. I was like, time and time again, I was finding, oh my gosh, that's a host plant, that's a host plant, and that's a host plant. And what do you know? They're all native plants to my area. And so while a lot of the nectar plants were not native and were your typical zinnias and tithonias and things like that, not native to my state of Tennessee, a lot of the host plants that I was being told about were native. And it got me thinking, okay, well, they've got to have native flowers too. And then I found out about native flowers and prairie plants, and I found out about more host plants, and I found out about host plants that are also nectar plants, and I couldn't get enough. And so this is why in these clips and these photos that I'm showing you right here in this video, that is why you'll notice my garden used to be more traditional annuals and veggies and butterfly gardening, just in general butterfly gardening plants. And you'll notice that over time, my garden as it gets more and more mature and more lush, it also gets more and more native. And that is on purpose, because even though it was an accident that I stumbled upon the whole native plant world, even though I grew up on a farm and played outside all the time, even though I was connected to nature in the sense that I was outside a lot, I played outside a lot. I even played in the dirt. I played in the woods. I did all these things when I was young, but I wasn't really aware of what the plants around me were. I was very plant blind. I did not know what was around me. I couldn't even tell you necessarily right now the tree that I always played underneath. There was this tree that I had a swing in this tree, a little rope swing, and I would swing on it before it broke. While I was on it, that was painful, okay? Tailbone pain is no joke, y'all. This rope swing broke, and I hit my tailbone on the root of this tree. But before that happened, this tree, it was just beloved to me. I loved it. But I cannot tell you what kind of tree that is. To this day, I have no idea what tree that was. And I think that speaks to, when you're young, if you're not taught what the plants are, if you have no way of knowing, even though you are super connected to nature, you still don't necessarily have the tools or the verbiage or the words to describe what you're looking at and what you are using every day. And so there's something to be said about native plant education. There is a lack of native plant education, at least there was when I was a kid. We would know, oh gosh, I don't even know if I even knew what a maple tree was when I was really little. I think I just knew this tree has this shape of leaves and this tree has this shape of leaves. I don't know what they're called, but I can tell that there's different shapes of leaves going on. I just don't know I don't even think I cared. I think that's another part of it too. I just cared about butterflies when I was little. And I would chase the butterflies. I had no idea that butterflies needed specific plants to survive. I just thought, the butterflies are here because I live in the country and there's just a lot of habitat for them. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what kind of habitat they needed, but there you go. And so in around 2015, there's some images in here from 2015 where you'll see that this was just a short, like a year or two after we moved in. We moved in around 2013. And so 2015 is just like a year or two after we moved here. And you'll see that it is just lawn. Pretty much barren wasteland lawn from front to back. And it didn't matter at the time to me because when I was in my early to mid 20s, I was just kind of not really into nature as much anymore. You know, when I was little, I was really into it. I played outside all the time. I played with praying mantises. I played with the butterflies. My mom and I rescued a butterfly from a spider's web once. I played in the leaves. I would rake leaves and jump in the pile. I mean, I would play outside all the time. I used to ride my bike outside. I loved feeling the wind as I'd ride my bike. But somewhere in the midst of college and getting married and, moving out on my own, I kind of lost that love of nature for a little while. It's not that I didn't love it still, but I was very rarely engaging with it. I have this little anecdote that I think about every once in a while, and I don't really know why it pops into my head, but when I was in college, I was going to university. I remember being on campus one day and had no idea that years later I would move to the city that I was going to college in. Because at the time I was commuting home back and forth like an hour or more from university to home and home to university every school day. I didn't live on campus. I didn't live even in the same city. But I would engage with nature in very, very, very tiny, minuscule ways in college. And one of those ways was I would just watch the squirrels. Like I would be on my way from my last class of the day, or maybe even in the middle of the day, during my lunch break. I would leave, I would be walking from my last class I was at to my car. And on the way to my car, I would encounter a squirrel, jumping up on a tree, right? Running from the grassy lawn up a tree. And I just loved it. It was my favorite thing. I really loved squirrels. And I just found them so delightful and so cute and so funny, right? Well, this was like all that I really had with nature. Sometimes I would sit outside on campus and do my homework or take photos because I would have this camera I would bring to school and I would take some photos. And so sometimes I would take pictures of like the fallen leaves or, little plants I didn't know what they were that I would find around campus. So I was interacting with nature, but it was at a very minimal level. And when I was finished with school and I got married, I moved to I was already living in a very rural area, but I moved to a different small town that was slightly bigger, but not much bigger. Do you need a short, quick guide to get started in wildlife gardening? Well, turns out I've got just the thing. I just came out with a new free ebook just for you, and it's called A Wild Approach to Gardening 101. And it's available on my website today at macylou.com/shop. It's free, so go check it out. What do you have to lose? And I didn't really interact with nature that much then either when I first got married. I was so focused on I mean, I just got married, so I was so focused on our marriage and our new home, our apartment, our little duplex we lived in town, that and I was focused on my job, and I was just not connected to nature much at that point either. And that was my early 20s. And, I had little pieces of this feeling that it was calling to me a little bit back then, but it was in tiny little voices. It was little tiny glimpses that I was into it. And I was trying to grow flowers inside my apartment. I was trying to grow like tulips inside my kitchen of my apartment, which is hilarious, right? I don't even know if that's possible. Like I would have like little seedlings come up, but they didn't fully come up, and then they would die. And so I thought, oh, I'm just really bad at this. And I tried some other flowers too, right? And they would just die. And so for a while, I just kind of gave it up. But one day we were out walking in our neighborhood, and right next door to our duplex, which, by the way, the duplex had almost no yard at all. My husband had to mow it, and that was a really good deal. We got a deal on the rent for him mowing, but the lawn was pretty small. And so there wasn't really anything to look at. There were no plants to really look at. I think there was one tree in the front, maybe a couple trees in the back, but there was not really much going on. I think there were some sweet gum trees though, because there's these seed balls that would fall, and my husband hated them because when he would mow, they would fly all over the place. But other than that, didn't have a whole lot of interaction with nature until one day we decided we were going to go for a walk. We were going to go for a walk in our neighborhood, in our small town, right there where our duplex is. We're just going to walk through the neighborhood. And next door to our duplex was an abandoned house. And one night we were woken up by police, and they told us, hey, just so you know, that abandoned house next door is on fire. It was like early morning hours, right? I don't know, like 3 or 4 in the morning. And we're like, really? And they're like, yeah. So they just wanted us to know that smoke could come into our apartment from next door, and that we just needed to be aware. We might have to like be careful breathing that in, right? And so one day after all that happened, after that house, they put out the flames, right? Whole different day. We're walking through the neighborhood and we look at the abandoned house. It's all burnt up, but it's still standing, but there's some burnt edges here and there, right? And in the yard of this abandoned house, there was like this patch of almost like prairie trying to come in, but in the middle of this, maybe prairie, maybe not, could have just been tall lawn grass for all I know. I don't know what it was, but in the middle of all of these plants that I didn't recognize at the time, there was a plant in the middle of it that I was going gaga over, and it was a peony. And no, peonies, they're not native. When I saw these peonies in bloom in the middle of this, I don't know what you would call it, this messy collection of plants that were very wild and very either prairie-like or overgrown lawn-like. I don't really know what they were. But in the middle of all this, these big, beautiful flowers were growing, and they are peonies. And I was like, well, that's strange. There's peonies just growing in the middle of this abandoned house's yard. And so naturally, since this was an abandoned house, and it had been before the fire even happened, I'm like, it shouldn't hurt for me to just clip some of these peonies and take them in, right? So I clipped the peonies and I took them into my apartment and I put them in some water and I put them at my window and I just enjoyed them. I just enjoyed these abandoned peonies in my little duplex apartment behind a Japanese steakhouse in the middle of town, small town. And I just thought they were so gorgeous, right? And from then on, for many, many years, peonies were my favorite flower. Peonies were my favorite flower because they were big, they were showy, they were beautiful, and they could grow in the middle of an abandoned house's yard. And I just thought that was so amazing. And then a few years later, I moved to a much larger city. And I was so excited. We first moved to this place and I was overjoyed. I felt like I had to pinch myself. I mean, I think like 3 years after we moved here, I was still pinching myself. Like, how in the world did we get lucky enough to be able to move here and live in this house and live in this city? Because quite frankly, at the little duplex, we were barely making it. And so when I was looking at houses in the city here, my friends were all telling me, like, not all of them, but some of my friends were telling me, like, don't you think it's too soon for you to get a house? Like, I don't know if you can afford that. And they were probably right. I think we got really lucky that when we first got this place, we didn't really have a bunch of problems right at the front end of it. Like, it took a couple years before we had a bunch of horrible things happen with our house that we had to get fixed back to back to back. But the good news is it didn't happen in the first, like, couple years. And so we had time to kind of, I guess, grow our savings a little bit before the craziness hit. But we were barely scraping by back at the duplex. And we were super lucky that we were able to barely scrape by to get this house. And it was no small feat. But that being said, we were also lucky because of the timing. This was before the market of houses went crazy, you guys. So keep that in mind. This was years ago. And so houses were a lot more affordable at the time, but even to us back then, the affordable prices seemed really high. And so we were really like, can we even do this? And so we moved in. I was really pinching myself for years that we were even here. And I didn't really care about the lawn for maybe 3 years or so. I think like 2013 to 2015 didn't do jack squat. I think we hooked up a hose. I think I grew like a dahlia, one dahlia. And I think that's it. And then I got some phlox. Of course, at the time, I didn't really pay attention to the name of anything. I didn't really memorize anything. I knew what a dahlia was. I knew what a peony was, and that was it. So I had phlox, I think, but I didn't know they were phlox. And they died. They didn't make it very long at all. And I had some other plants, and then I started growing some stuff from seed. And that's when things really started going. I was really getting into it when I could watch something grow from seed and I could actually keep it alive, because it took a lot of time for me to be able to do that. It took a lot of time for me to understand the lighting difference between being outside and being at a window. It's just very, very, very different. I used to grow my little seedlings at my window, and I didn't have grow lights. I didn't have a heat mat. I still don't have a heat mat, by the way, but I didn't have grow lights at the time. I would grow things in the window, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but it was still fun to grow things. Even if they only grew like a couple inches and then died, it was still it was still fun to me. I was obsessed. And I would grow these little tiny little cups of soil and seedlings in the window of my art studio. And at the time, my art studio was really small because it was upstairs in a spare bedroom. And it was really tiny because at the time my brother lived with us, which I love him so much. I owe a lot of my life to him, honestly. But he lived with us at the time, and he lived in the basement. And so when you guys see my art studio in my videos, that's the basement. That's why my art studio is bigger now, is because it's in the basement. My previous studio was upstairs in this tiny little extra bedroom, and I even grew these little tiny seedlings in the window of that little tiny art studio. And I loved it. I had a lot of fun. I did eventually kind of run out of room in that art studio, and I needed to eventually move downstairs to the basement. And so when my brother moved out, I moved down to the basement with my art supplies. And that was huge. Like, I had so much more room to create my art. And, you know, sometimes it's tough, right? Because, like, I miss my brother living with us a lot of times, because I'm like, there's pros and cons to having roommates, right? But there's something special about having your sibling live with you for a while. I just really think it was a special time, and I'm never going to forget that. Well, you can probably guess that around the time my brother moved out and around the time I moved my art supplies to the basement, I started to look at my garden from a different perspective because, well, I was down in the basement now, and I was looking out at my garden from a different window altogether. Instead of looking out at my garden from up in the second story, or not really second story, but in the main story of my house up high, I could still look at it that way, but I was also looking at it from my studio doors. They are glass doors. And I was starting to notice that there's just something missing, right? And right around that time, I decided to really cultivate my view out of those doors, out of the windows of those doors. What do I want to see when I look out of my art studio? And so, at the same time, I was really obsessed with native plants at this point. So I had already been through my annual phase and my vegetable phase and my, non-natives like sweet alyssum. I was already through that phase, kind of, or I was about to be. And I was like, what can I do here? You know, I was kind of in a transition period because I was still doing those annuals I was talking about. I was still doing the sweet alyssum and the zinnias and the other things. And I was also doing some squash, but I was trying to grow tulips as well, and I was having the most trouble. I was yelling at squirrels at this point. I was yelling at squirrels for eating my tulip bulbs because they would find my tulip bulbs and they would eat them. And some of my tulip bulbs probably rotted over the winter, and some of them were eaten by squirrels. And I would be yelling at the squirrels. And so I went from loving the squirrels on my college campus to yelling at squirrels for eating my tulips. And I got sick of growing tulips because I couldn't really get them to come back year after year, and I got sick of having to replant them each year, and that happened pretty quick. I was very impatient in that regard. I was never really into having to plant the same things every single year over and over and over because they don't stay they just die off. You know, I wasn't super into it, even though annuals were giving me that pop of color. I wanted some perennials, and so I was really getting into perennials, and I planted a couple more peonies. I already had one peony by this point, so I planted 3 total. And I I at some point lost my dahlia because I think it got mowed over because I planted it in like the lawn, right? With like nothing around it. And, as I'm getting more into native plants and I'm getting further away from these other plants, I'm also like, I really want an archway right here. So created an archway, like a natural archway out of sticks and tree branches, and designed a lot of my garden around this archway, and planted trees. Finally, for the longest time I was scared to plant any big trees. For the longest time, you guys, I was terrified because I only have a quarter of an acre, and I would just like look at my quarter acre and just be like, it's just too tiny for trees. Of course, I took the chance eventually. I finally planted a black cherry tree, which I was terrified to plant at first. And that baby has been growing really, really quickly. It is a fast grower. And I planted it at only like 2 feet tall. And now it's like, I don't know, 10 feet tall, 12 feet tall. Maybe taller. I don't even know how tall it is anymore. It's at least double my height. And I'm 5'2"-ish. So it's at least like 10 foot tall. But it used to be like 2 foot tall. And this has only been like 4 years. Almost 5. Almost 5 years, and it's grown to about 10, 12 foot tall. Guys, that's incredible. Okay? It's growing really quickly, and I'm happy about that because even though I have a tiny yard, I am just really not comfortable in really hot environments. So when summer comes around, I am being tortured by the heat. That is just how I feel. That's just how my body works. I am sensitive to heat like nobody's business, and I get hot easily and quickly. I can overheat easily. I can get headaches from the overheating. It's not pretty. It's not good. And I sweat like crazy too. It's not like, oh, well, at least I don't sweat much. No, I sweat like crazy. I get headaches, and I have to wear a crap ton of sunscreen. So that's another reason I kind of hate summer. I'm going to say it. I kind of hate summer, even though I love summer. I love summer for the butterflies and the flowers and the lushness and the greenery, and just there's so much to look at. There's so much wildlife habitat. There's so many critters to film and watch and follow around the garden. But I really have to have some shade. So I'm glad I planted that tree. I'm glad I was brave enough to plant that tree because, guys, this girl has to have some shade. I know that grasslands and prairies are probably one of the most important ecosystems to cultivate right now, and I apologize, but I have to have some shade. My cats are actually fighting each other right now. Really? Hold on. Anyways, had to break up a cat fight. I know that a lot of people are talking about how important grasslands and prairies are, and I totally agree. And I'm still trying to create that habitat too. But I have a problem. My problem is I need shade physically for me. I need shade. I need a tree. And I have that now, somewhat, but it's still not enough shade. I still need more. So I've been planting more trees, and the problem I have is I only have a quarter acre. So I only have so much space. And over time, as these trees shade me as I need, they're also going to shade my garden. And so I'm trying to figure out how to create a section of my garden that's prairie and grassland, and a section that's shrubby, and a section that's trees. And I don't know if I'm going to accomplish this goal or if I'm going to fail miserably. But I'm trying. I'm trying to have all 3 of those types of habitat because not only do I know how important they are, but I also just really love all of those close together somehow, which is really hard to do, right? Because a tree casts shade over a wide range of soil. And so, especially if it's a large tree. So I'm trying kind of a combo of like, I'm deciding like to put the large trees on one end of my yard and then put the smaller trees and the shrubs kind of in the middle, and then let the grassland and prairie kind of be either close to my house or on the opposite side under the power lines. Because the perfect place for shrubs and thickets as well as grassland and prairie is under power lines, because you shouldn't be putting tall trees under power lines anyway, right? So it makes more sense to do prairie and grassland or thicket under power lines. And I'm kind of trying to do both, and I don't know how it's going to work out, because I might be shooting myself in the foot with it, but I'm trying, guys. So I think it's going to be really, really great for a while. And then there's going to be a tipping point where I think eventually I'm going to have too much shade. But we'll see. We'll see. We will cross that bridge when we get to it, right? But, I added these native plants, and I added, I took away lawn gradually over the years, but probably a little too quickly. I don't regret it, though, because I'm happy with having less lawn. I just am. Even though I have a lot of weeds in my garden and it's hard to keep up with all the maintenance on it, because I have added so many new garden beds so quickly, I don't regret it, because I would rather have imperfect native garden beds, as many as possible, than one really perfect native bed and then a shit ton of lawn. Like, maybe that's an unpopular opinion. I don't know, but I want to be surrounded by my garden. I don't want like a little border. I don't want like one little border and then everything else is just invasive Bermuda grass. I just don't want that. So I may be shooting myself in the foot somewhat, going a little bit too quickly, but I can't help myself. And guys, you do your own pace however you feel comfortable, because it's really up to you. And it depends on how messy you can handle. Like, how much of a mess can you handle? I can handle a pretty big mess. And the word mess and messy, those words have been kind of used in negative connotations, and I just kind of want to I want to embrace them. I want to embrace the mess, because I think nature is messy, and I think that's kind of what we need, is messy. I don't know. What do you guys think? I just think we need a little bit of messy. I think messy is actually more aesthetically pleasing. I've loved messy this whole time. Even when I was a traditional gardener, I didn't really like the empty space in my garden. I had so much empty space because I was a new gardener and I didn't have many plants yet. And I just was so frustrated. Like, I need more plants because there's too much space, like, in between them. I don't like it. It's not, it's always been my aesthetic to be drawn to naturalistic, messy, prairie, thicket gardens. It just has. I've always hated, like, when things are clipped in boxes. Now, topiaries can be cool as, like, little specimens, like a little specimen topiary here and there for fun. I just don't like when an entire garden is, like, clipped into boxes, or an entire garden is clipped into balls. It's just weird to me. I also think part of it is because I don't like open space as much. I don't really like open space. I don't like open floor plan, even though that's what my house is. It's open floor plan. I don't like open floor plan, and I don't like open space environments very much. Like, probably unpopular opinion, because a lot of prairies are open space, and I definitely think prairies are beautiful, don't get me wrong. But when I'm cultivating my own space, I want mystery, I want lushness, I want to feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's around the next corner. I do not know what's around the next corner. That's why I love shrubs and trees so much, because they give a little bit of height and you can kind of hide like what's around the corner. But what's cool is some of these tall prairie grass, tall grass prairie and tall wildflowers is you can kind of do the same thing, but it is seasonal specific. And what I mean by that is like Joe Pye is a great example. Ironweed is a great example. And so is frostweed, aka white crownbeard. These plants get really tall, but they get really tall at a certain time of year, right? Whereas a shrub, once it's mature, it's the height that it's going to be. And so when it leaves out, it just leaves out off of those branches, right? Versus having to come back from the ground. So when something has to come back all the way from the ground, like a perennial tall flower does, you're only getting that mystery that small time of year, that section of the year where it is a tall plant, because it doesn't start out tall in spring, right? So I think that's why I lean toward thicket species now. I lean toward shrubs, and I lean toward trees, because I want the mystery, I want the intrigue. And I know that like a lot of people use the term garden rooms in a more traditional way. I love the term garden rooms. I know that like a lot of native plant people don't like that term, but I actually do, because instead of looking at it as a traditional, formal, sterile, clipped, boxy garden room, I think of it more like we can make much better garden rooms with native plants. Much better. I mean, just go out to nature. Go to any woodland or shrubby thicket area. You don't know what's around the corner. The paths, they curve, and you don't know what's next. So, I don't know. I love stuff like that. And so for me, I think the prairie and grassland areas are going to be under the power lines and near the road, places like that, and then up against my house until that gets shaded. Because I think a lot of my garden is going to eventually be shaded, but we'll see. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I have been reducing my lawn every single year for like 4 years now. And I've been loving it. Even though it's sometimes frustrating, I've still been loving it. I think it's because I kind of have an obsession. I think it helps if you have an obsession with it. I don't know, it's just, it gives me hope. It gives me hope year round. I think it's really easy to get kind of down in the dumps in the winter when things are dormant. But I can get hopeful year round, because in the winter, even though things are dormant, I've still got some evergreens out there, and then I also can plant my seeds, and I can also grow plants inside from seed. I can plan my garden. I can draw and sketch new garden ideas. I can order seeds. I can order plants. I can walk at the park and look and see what's going on at the park, and I can like see, is there anything going on right now in a visual sense? There's a lot going on underground in the winter. There's a lot of root growth, and things are going on under the ground, right? But is there anything above ground I can look at and I can see during the winter? But yeah, so this winter I'm probably going to be paying more attention to trees and shrubs and like woody plants, vines, things like that, because I have a new book that I bought from the store called like I forget what it's called. It's like the plants of Tennessee and Kentucky or something like that. And it's got like pictures of the branches. It's got like a key at the beginning. You can key things out and figure out what plant you're looking at and identify things based on what they look like in the winter. So it's got like their buds and the twigs and when the leaves are gone, it shows you what things look like when the leaves are gone. And I am so excited to actually take my book out to the park and identify things by their twigs and their branches and their bark. I think that'll be fun. I think that'll be a fun winter activity that I could probably do every year until I learn my trees and my shrubs better, because I still get confused from time to time on quite a few species of trees. And so I think this will be a really good way to get more acquainted with nature. So yeah, this segment of the video has been, you have seen my garden from like 2015 all the way through 2023. And now we're going to transition to the next part of the video, which is all about 2024, the year in review, or the year recap, the end of year recap. So the next portion of the video is going to be all 2024, and it's going to be 2024 from January all the way until October, November, December of this year, so that you can see winter, spring, summer, and fall all in one video. So this is a long video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. If you need to pause the video, now would be a great time to pause it, take a break, go get food, go get coffee, tea, take a bathroom break, because this is a long video. And I wanted to do this video really special for you guys because I want to inspire people. I want people to know that most people can do this. And no, not everybody can. Some people have physical limitations. Some people don't have the land to do this. Some people don't have the money or the time. But if you don't have the land to do it, maybe you can do it on someone else's land. Maybe you can get permission to do it on somebody else's land. Maybe you can do guerrilla gardening, or maybe you can help your local conservation organization. Maybe you can volunteer to remove invasives or plant natives somewhere. If you don't have land to do it yourself, but you're physically capable, maybe you're not physically capable. Maybe you can have a friend help you out. Maybe you can have a family member help you out and plant some stuff in your garden for you. Maybe you can hire somebody if you have the money to. Or if you don't have the money, time, or physical ability, maybe you can just encourage someone else to do it. Maybe you can get the word out and encourage your friends or family members to start a native garden, a small little native garden in their yard. You can start super small and you can grow over time, and maybe you can convince somebody to do it. If you just convince one person to do this, then you're actually doing a really good job, because it's really hard. It's actually really hard to convince even the people you would think you could convince to do this. Sometimes it's actually still hard to convince even them to do this. So if you can, then you're doing a really good job. And just sharing this video is a great thing you can do. Liking the video, commenting on the video. All of those are helpful. If you can't create your own habitat yourself, I get it. Not everybody has access to all these different things. But definitely don't think that money should stop you, because when I say, oh, maybe you can't afford to hire somebody, don't let money stop you though, because there are a lot of budget-friendly ways to create a native garden. There's a lot of free ways to create a native garden. So don't let the money thing get you stop you. Trust me, there's so many ways to do this for basically free. And I should probably create a video about that at some point. Let me know in the comments if you want to see that. But yeah, this video is not over. This is just a little break in between segments. And so we're going to jump into the next segment, which is all of 2024, the garden through the seasons. First, we are going to start off with winter. Okay, so around January of this year, 2024, we had a very interesting and intense snowstorm. And so that is where I'm starting this video off, because I think that not only was it beautiful, but it was also just really interesting. I think it's good to start the video off with that because it was right near the beginning of the year. And it did require us to basically just stay home for several days. I think it was over a week. So it was a pretty intense storm. We ended up needing to get groceries, and we were like, when are we going to be able to get out of our driveway? Because the ice was also very intense. So this storm, although beautiful, it kind of lingered a little bit longer than we wanted it to. The snow and the ice did. So, if you don't know, East Tennessee, we're not super used to this kind of weather. I mean, we get it once in a while, but I would say we only get snows like this once in a blue moon, this deep of snow and this much ice. And so it was intense, and it took a lot of energy and effort to even start to dig the ice and the snow off of the driveway and the road. It was a lot. But I'm still glad it happened because it was really beautiful to see, and there were so many cool things to watch in the garden. The birds were having a blast. They were eating berries from the American Beauty Berry. They were perching in the redbud tree. They were eating seeds from the aster plants, and it was just so pretty. And it was also really cool to see a lot of our seed heads poking up through the snow. The snow was pretty much engulfing a lot of the plants, several inches from the ground level. And so sometimes some of the plants were short enough that all you could see were the tippy tops of the plants poking up through the snow, and that was just really cool to see. We also just enjoy seeing snow here because we don't get a lot of it very often. And so when we do get it, it just feels special. It feels extra special. And, you know, growing up, I went through I was alive during the blizzard of 93. And that snow level was intense, way more intense than this one. So it's kind of crazy to look back on that and think about how little I was back then and how badly I wanted to play in the snow, but I wasn't allowed to because it was just too deep. And how we had to leave our house because the power went out and we had to go somewhere else where there was power. And we were just so little. And it took me back to memory lane, seeing the snowstorm and just how crazy it can really be, how you can be snowed in or iced in. And then in some storms, you can actually leave depending on your vehicle. During this snowstorm in January 2024, though, we knew people who had trucks and they got their trucks stuck in the snow and ice. And some people even hit a tree. Thankfully, they were okay. But it just goes to show, even when you have a truck that has four-wheel drive, it's not a foolproof way to get through this type of weather. Especially here where salting the roads is hit and miss. I mean, some roads get treated and some roads just don't get treated. And it's because we just don't have the resources in this area for this type of snow level. Unlike you all, if you're watching from up north, hi, you guys have a lot more resources than we do because you have to deal with it more often than we do. So it's kind of funny, we get it less often, so you would think we wouldn't have as big of an issue. But the thing is when it does happen, we're just really not prepared for it. Regular people and the city itself. So want to throw that out there. So yeah, this was the winter season, and I found quite a bit of joy in the snow that we got, and just some of the brighter parts of winter. Winter can be kind of a depressing season for a lot of people, and I think that I'm not immune to this completely, but I think that I use winter as a time to not only grow native plants from seed. I do a lot of winter sowing, so it gives me something to nurture, it gives me something to work on, but I also plan my garden in winter a lot of times. I think of ideas of like, what is missing in my garden? What can I plan for the spring? Like, what can I look forward to coming up? So not only am I starting seeds in the winter, some seeds are in my fridge in the winter, and I just kind of pop in and check on them every now and then. But I'm also planning, I'm even drawing. A lot of times I draw garden plans in the winter, and just kind of prepare myself for spring. And what do I want to buy in the spring? And if you are in this stage, think about what native grasses you want to get, because this is a great time of year to plan that out. And the reason for that is in the winter, you can look around and see, where are the gaps in my screening? Tall native grasses could be right for you depending on your style of gardening and where you live. If you have a small garden and you like more formal native plantings, then the tall, aggressive native grasses are probably not going to be for you. But for other folks like myself, who, even though I have a small garden, I like aggressive native plants because I have so many aggressive invasive plants that pop up in my garden that it's just nice to have just some species that can just fucking go ham and do their thing and just really just spread like crazy, and also provide the height to go along with my tall native flowers. For example, frostweed, white crownbeard, whatever you want to call it, native grasses, they're going to be great to go along with that, the tall ones, because that flower is really, really tall, and it kind of looks funny in the winter right now. And technically it's not winter in real life right now as I'm recording this audio. It's technically still fall, but we have about 10-12 days and it'll be winter officially here in East Tennessee as I'm recording this audio. And to me, it just feels like it's winter already. I consider this winter by now. It's been cold and windy, but it's past few days, it's actually been a little bit warmer, but still windy. So we had some pretty big temperature dips already, and so I'm already thinking about it being winter, even though it's not technically winter yet. And I'm seeing all the gaps between my arborvitaes and between my white crownbeard plants, and I'm just thinking, it's time to plan what native grasses I can put in there. Switchgrass is probably a good one. Big blue stem might work. But I am going to be thinking about that. I have seeds for switchgrass. I already have some switchgrass plants I've put in, but I don't have any big blue stem. And so I'm like kind of tempted. Should I get some big blue stem in the spring? Should I grow it from seed? What should I do there? Because there are options. And if you don't know, I like to get a lot of my native grass seeds from Roundstone Native Seed. Not sponsored, but if they ever wanted to sponsor me, I'd be more than happy to do so. But in the meantime, I'm just going to freely speak about them because they're awesome. I've been to their facilities. It's a pretty cool place. And so I already have some switchgrass I started from seed, and it's the seed I bought from Roundstone. But should I get big blue stem? Guys, I'm tempted. I'm tempted to get big blue stem. The gaps between the frostweed it's not a big deal in the spring and the early summer, but as summer kind of goes on, frostweed kind of start like near the end of summer, early fall, frostweed can kind of die back at the bottom, and it would just be nice to have something at ground level and kind of the medium level between the ground and the tippy tops of the flowers to just kind of give some habitat. I feel like the birds would have a little bit more protection if I had more native grasses, and winter is a great time to plant this because it's actually best to plant your native warm season grasses in late spring, early summer, and then into the early mid-summertime, because native warm season grasses, well, they're called warm season grasses for a reason. They grow better and establish better in the warm season. So this is one of those exceptions when we say it's best to plant in the fall. This is one of the exceptions where I don't think we should plant these in the fall, because I have planted some grasses in the fall in the past that were warm season, and they did not fare well at all. They did not establish well, and I think all 3 of those died. And so from now on, I grow them from seed, and I either start them earlier, like in the winter even, inside under grow lights where it's 70 degrees-ish, and start those seeds inside under grow lights, or I start them outside in the winter in pots, no protection, not a milk jug, just in a pot, just out in the open, or I buy the plant in the spring, late spring, early summer, because those are going to be the best times to do native warm season grasses. Anyways, moving on, now we're going to talk about spring. Spring is still one of my favorite times of the year, even though I'm no longer a traditional gardener and I'm more of a native plant and wildlife gardener now. Spring was my favorite season when I was a traditional gardener, and it's still really close to my favorite. I think fall is my new favorite, but spring is a close second. And there's just nothing like spring. There's just nothing like it. The way that the birds sound in the spring, the birds that you hear singing in the spring, early spring, where you see the first blooms popping up on your redbud trees or your American plum trees or your dogwood trees. Like, early spring is just, it's wonderful, it's beautiful. And then you also, when you go to wild places, if you don't have any in your own garden, then you can go to wild places and see spring ephemerals. And I just recently started adding spring ephemerals to my garden, like Mayapples. I have Mayapples now, and I'm so excited. And I have other spring bloomers now that I didn't have before, like wild columbine. Wild columbine is fantastic for the hummingbirds, and Mayapples are just really cool, okay? Mayapples, they pop up in the spring, and then they go dormant by the time the weather gets warm. And so they just kind of disappear. So you want to have something kind of growing around them, but you don't want something to crowd them completely out. But you want something to grow nearby to kind of take over when warm weather comes in, because that's when the Mayapples kind of just go dormant. Now, columbine, the flowers go away kind of quickly, but the foliage lasts for quite a while, and it can kind of go dormant certain times of the summer, I think, but then it might pop back up in the fall. I've been seeing that here. I don't know if that's typical, but that is what I'm seeing in my garden. I see the foliage there in the spring, and I see it kind of go by the wayside when it gets really dry in the summer, and then it seems to pop back in the fall. So I don't know if columbine is fully evergreen or if it's semi-evergreen, but I think it's either one of those. So check into that, but it's a really great spring plant. And then who could forget wild violets? Violets are one of the most important plants in my garden. It is a native ground cover. It is a host plant to fritillary butterflies. Even though I don't really ever see those caterpillars, I think it's because I think there's a certain time that they actually eat the leaves. It might be at night. I can't remember. Don't quote me on that. But it's kind of a little bit more difficult to actually catch them in the act on the violets, but they do exist. It does happen. I'll end up seeing little holes in the leaves, and that's my sign that, oh, they've probably been here. And then the flowers themselves on the violets are gorgeous. A lot of people who are traditional gardeners kill the violets in their lawn, and this is just silly. I feel like if you are not lawn turf grass obsessed, you should just completely stop doing that, because it's just harming your wildlife garden. If you're a wildlife gardener and you're on this channel, don't kill your violets. Spread them around. Let them spread on their own. But you can also dig them out of your lawn and move them to your flower beds. A lot of people are like, no, don't do that. And I'm like, actually do that, because we need less invasive weeds popping into our garden beds, and we need more native ground covers to grow under our shrubs and under our taller plants. The native violets can grow perfectly fine under your taller plants. There's really no reason to snuff them out. That's just silly. As long as they're native to your area, let them do their thing. They are host plant. And I really love the American plum blooms and the redbud blooms. I can't get enough. They're such a gorgeous scene to see in the spring. And I also love dogwood blooms. I personally don't yet have a mature flowering dogwood tree yet, but I do have slightly more mature silky dogwood shrubs, and their blooms are definitely beautiful. But I am so excited for my baby flowering dogwood trees to grow and fill in, and I cannot wait until they produce blooms, which will probably take several years. But I'm really excited still, because it's really funny. Growing the native flowering dogwoods from seed is interesting. I had some failure. A couple of them died, and I think they died from powdery mildew, but that's weird because normally plants don't die from powdery mildew. They normally can just be just fine with powdery mildew. So I don't know if powdery mildew affects woody baby seedlings more than herbaceous perennials, or if it was actually just a coincidence and something else killed the trees and the powdery mildew was just a coincidence. It was just there at the same time as they died. I don't know, but 2 of my little saplings died. One of them made it, and I planted the one that made it into Fairy Creek /side garden. But I digress. That is for a different video. We will talk about that in a different time. But spring is wonderful. I love the smells in the spring. I love the blooms. I love the bird song. I love the temperature, how like some days are kind of chilly and some days are more warm, and it's not super hot yet in early spring. But by the time like mid-May to late May comes around in my garden and in my little microclimate, it starts to get pretty freaking hot. It starts to get pretty hot in May. Like I said, usually mid-May to late May. And I know this because my husband and I, we have an anniversary at the end of May. And so anytime we've gone anywhere at the end of May for an anniversary, I'm usually wearing like short sleeves. I've got my hair up and I'm a little sweaty. I can remember this every year. It's pretty hot by then. So before summer even gets here, it's already hot. So like June is hot. July, hotter. August, hottest. Okay? So moving on from spring to summer, I really think that summer is a lot of people's favorite because it's warm. You're totally away from the cold. It's the opposite of winter, and you're vibing, right? You got your sunglasses, your sunscreen, and you're vibing. I have mixed feelings about summer. I'm the kind of person who I love summer because it is beloved by butterflies. That's how I started gardening. I started gardening because I was obsessed with butterflies, and that's how I got here, and that's why I fell in love with all the other wildlife critters, is because of my first love, which was butterflies. And so butterflies, they love summer. They love heat. Now, they can get overheated, contrary to popular belief. They also need shade, so remember that. Butterflies do need the sun more than they need the shade, but they also need shade because it can get too hot for them. They can get overheated. So, little tidbit there. But for the most part, they love the heat and they love summer. So, that is really the main thing I love about summer, and I love June in general because June is when my garden pops off. June is when the blooms are at their peak in my garden. This may change over time because I am getting better about adding blooms for every season. So I have more spring blooms this year than I have had in the past. And I have been adding more diversity for my spring garden than I have had before. But it's still more flower filled in the summer, and specifically in June. Early June, not so much. But as you start to get into like mid-June, that's pretty much peak bloom in my garden. That is when so many things are blooming, and it is a beautiful show. And July, like early July, is also really gorgeous in the garden when it comes to blooming. So June and July, they pop off. As you start to get into late July, I start to really suffer from the heat. I personally just suffer so much in that late July, early August heat. It's brutal. And with climate change and all of that jazz, late July is not the only hot time, and neither is August. August, that's always kind of been peak heat around here, but unfortunately, it bleeds into September as well. And so early September is pretty much just as miserable as late August around here. And it used to be that, early to mid-October was you could kind of start to feel the temperature shift. But currently, 2024 and the past few years as well, October has been hot as well. So October has also been hot until you get to maybe late October, like after my husband's birthday, like his is in mid-October. But it doesn't really cool off much until kind of near the end of October at this point. Somewhere between his birthday and Halloween, it finally starts to chill just a little bit. And it finally starts to feel better. And Halloween is peak fall color around here. Halloween is just the best time to be here for my fall garden, because Halloween is when a lot of the fall color is showing up, but not all the leaves have fallen off. It's like the leaves are still on the trees. You can see a lot of fall color. It's not perfect. You get a little bit of fall color before that, and you get a little bit of fall color after that, but I think the peak is Halloween pretty much. And so I'm learning that, and it does shift a little bit every year, but I think Halloween is probably the best bet. If I wanted to plan a fall garden tour, Halloween is the best time to plan it because of just what is going on in the garden at that time. And fall is just a beautiful time to look at the garden, look at the fall color, and evaluate what can you add to your garden in the fall, because not only is it the best time to plant most plants, fall is the best time to plant most plants. It's the best time for sure to plant almost all your trees and almost all your shrubs. And then it's also the best time to plant most of your herbaceous perennials as well, except, like I mentioned earlier in this video, the native warm season grasses. Those are better to plant late spring, early summer. Anywho, fall. I cannot say enough good things about fall. Fall is definitely my favorite season. It is really up there for me. I love fall color. I love trees. I love shrubs. I love thickets. And so it's just perfect for me, right? Fall is a great time to decide what shrubs do I want to add to this landscape? What shrubs are doing it for me? What shrubs are not doing it for me? And what shrubs do I want more of? And then what shrubs do I not have that I really think would work really well here? And the reason for that is not only can you decide what colors are missing in your palette, like let's say you have a lot of yellow and you don't have a lot of orange or red. Maybe add some more orange and red fall color shrubs and trees, depending on how much room you have, right? So sassafras is a great example for me. Sometimes sassafras is more yellow, sometimes it's more orange, and sometimes it's more of a red, and sometimes it kind of has all those colors on the same tree. And I personally just fell in love with sassafras this year because I have a baby sapling sassafras tree, and the color was just phenomenal, and I cannot wait for that tree to mature. And it's also the first time I finally had a spicebush swallowtail caterpillar on any of my plants. I've already been growing spicebush plants for years, and I have never seen a spicebush caterpillar on my spicebush plants. That doesn't mean they never existed on there, but I have never seen them. And finally, I had this baby sassafras tree growing, and I found my very first spicebush swallowtail caterpillar on my sassafras tree. And it was wonderful. And they create a little hiding place in the roll of a leaf. They roll the leaf over themselves and they hide. And it's just really, really cool. They're really adorable. And I saw a few spicebush swallowtail adults in my garden this year as well. I have seen them in my garden in the past, but I kind of hadn't been seeing them as often the past few years. So I saw them a little bit more this year, I think, than last year. So that's really exciting. They were probably attracted to both the native flowers and the sassafras tree, and maybe the spicebush shrubs as well. But I'm really excited for that. And so because of my falling in love with the sassafras tree, I ordered some sassafras seeds, and I've been planting sassafras seeds in my garden in multiple places, and I've been protecting where I've been planting them with those little dollar store trash cans that I use to protect things from squirrels, from birds, from rabbits. You know the drill. And it's been fun. I still have a lot of sassafras seeds, so I'm going to be giving away some to my friends locally here that I've been chatting with privately. And I have some in the fridge so that I can just continuously keep planting lots of sassafras seeds in my garden, and so I can have some for my friends and family members, and maybe even do a little bit of guerrilla gardening, but I am not going to go into detail about that on this video because it's a public video. But I want sassafras to be everywhere. I want there to be sassafras everywhere, because not only is sassafras native, a host plant to spicebush swallowtail butterflies, it's gorgeous year-round. It is beautiful in the spring with the flowers. It's beautiful in the summer with the leaves and the different leaf shapes, because it has those really cool mitten-shaped leaves, but it has the non-mitten-shaped leaves too. It has a lot of variety going on for it. And then the fall has beautiful fall color, and in the winter it's also pretty because it has really cool bark when it matures, and it also, as it matures, has these like candelabra like branches that come out from the tree and then go down and then up like a candelabra or a chandelier or something, and then that's where the buds are at the top of that. And it's just freaking gorgeous, okay? Year-round beautiful, smells really good. When you smell the leaves or the twigs, they smell really good. And I can't really say, there's just so much to say about sassafras. It's wonderful, but I can't say anymore because If I do, this video will be too long. But just know that it's a host plant, it's a good native tree, it's a beautiful native tree, and it's beautiful year-round, and it's good for the wildlife, and it creates berries for the wildlife as well if you have female and male plants around. So I can't think of a downside to sassafras. So if you can, let me know. But anywho, I don't really know what else to say other than thank you guys so much for watching. I want you to leave a comment down below. Let me know what season in my garden is your favorite to look at on the screen. Like, did you enjoy the winter scenes the best, the spring, summer, or the fall ones? Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know in the comments what your favorite season is in general. Are you a winter lover, a spring lover, a fall lover, or a summer lover? Which summer lover just sounds cool, right? Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Hey guys, don't forget to follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram. These are the two best social media accounts other than YouTube, where you can find me and you can see me post photos of the garden, thoughts on wildlife, and more. So don't forget to follow me over there. Brand new items are now available in the shop. Thanks so much to viewers like you for supporting the channel. To support the channel, like the video, comment, and subscribe. You can also support my work by buying art from me at macylou.com. Thanks for watching!